Hello everyone, welcome to the Life Sketches channel. My name is Freya, I'm 38 years old, and people often describe me as a confident, loving mother and a strong woman. I have long, straight brown hair, green eyes, a near-perfect body, white smooth skin, and a warm smile. Most people around me think that I have a perfect life, but no one knows the conflicts, the loneliness, and the emotional storms I go through beneath the surface. Today, I am going to tell you a story that changed my life completely and made me a completely different person. It is a story full of loneliness, the search for love, and forbidden emotions. It is not easy for me to tell, but I want to share with you this secret that I carry inside me to lighten up a little bit. In my world, from the outside, I have a perfect family. I married my husband David about 15 years ago, and he is known for his dedication to his work. He works hard for our family, but over time this hard work began to create cracks in the foundations of our marriage. Our time together diminished, our conversations became superficial, and I found myself surrounded by loneliness in the house. But at the center of this story is not David, but Lucas, my stepson from his first marriage. Lucas was only 4 years old when he came into my life. His mother had passed away when Lucas was very young. It was both a responsibility and a joy for me to raise him, to be both a mother and a friend to him. I always treated him like my own child and never stopped loving him. Today, I'm going to tell you how the bond between Lucas and I turned into something different and how it affected me deeply. I don't expect you to judge me as you listen to this story, but I want you to understand, sometimes you are left alone with feelings that you can't even admit to yourself. This story will make you question the mesmerizing and destructive power of love on the one hand, and the fine line between right and wrong on the other. Now, I want to talk about that summer when everything changed. That summer was the most complicated and unforgettable period of my life. David was going to be out of town for weeks on a big project. Lucas and I decided to go to our family's summer house, which had always been a place of peace for me. The view of the sea, the tranquility and the cozy atmosphere. It was like being in another world. But this time, the time I spent there brought me more mixed feelings than peace. Lucas was now 19 years old. He had become a tall, athletically built and charismatic young man. I hadn't noticed how he had grown up. In my mind, he was still that little boy, the innocent boy who held my hands tightly when he lost his mother and called me Mommy. But that summer, I realized that Lucas wasn't a child. He was a replica of the man I'd married, David. When we arrived at the cottage, Lucas was as friendly and helpful as ever. He helped me unload my bags from the car, then started arranging the sun loungers on the patio. It always made me happy to see him being so thoughtful. "I'm lucky to have a son like you," I said. "I'm lucky to have a mother like you," Lucas replied with a smile. That first day, everything was normal. We chatted in the kitchen while I prepared dinner. We took a walk by the sea in the afternoon and watched a movie at night. But as time passed, I began to feel something change in the way Lucas looked at me. One evening, we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Lucas sat next to me with a glass of lemonade and looked out to sea in silence for a while. Then he asked, "Mum, do you feel lonely?" The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes," I said, honestly. "But everyone feels lonely from time to time, don't they?" Lucas took a deep breath and turned to me. "I don't want you to feel that. You are a very special and beautiful person. Not everyone can have someone like you. How can someone hurt you when they have someone like you?" His words made me both happy and somehow uncomfortable. I smiled at him without saying anything and tried to change the subject. But in that moment, I felt that Lucas's affection for me was more than the love between a child and his mother. That night, when I retired to my room, my thoughts couldn't get away from Lucas. His gaze, his tone of voice, and his interest in me kept running through my mind. "It's just a misunderstanding," I told myself over and over again. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. The next morning, Lucas had made breakfast. He smiled at me in the kitchen and asked, "Are we going to the sea today?" It seemed like a simple question, but the warmth in his tone made me pause for a moment. "Sure," I hesitantly replied, but I felt something inside me begin to change. When we went to the beach that day, Lucas stayed with me the whole time, helping me with little things like setting up umbrellas or organizing towels. I liked this attention from Lucas, who was normally independent and self-sufficient, but at the same time it made me nervous. When we entered the sea, I caught Lucas's gaze on me. When his eyes lingered on me for a long time, my heart sped up. "It's just a coincidence," I tried to convince myself. He was always hiding in the water with me, touching me. But that day, I realized that the connection between between Lucas and me had changed in a way I had never felt before. The time we spent on the beach that day was like a turning point where our relationship was quietly changing shape. When we returned home, Lucas seemed as cheerful and energetic as ever. I, on the other hand, felt a heaviness inside me. I couldn't quite define what it was. A guilt, an uneasiness, or maybe it was an attraction I was trying to suppress. At dinner, we set the table as usual, Lucas trying to make me laugh with his jokes. But despite the smile on my face, I couldn't get rid of the thoughts swirling around in my head. I remembered David's distant behavior for a long time, for about 5 years. I thought about the nights when we didn't touch each other, didn't talk, didn't even look each other in the eye. One by one, the moments when I felt like a stranger in the house flooded my mind. The warmth I felt around Lucas and the attention he gave me reminded me of what I had been missing for a long time. After dinner, when Lucas and I were clearing the dishes together, I accidentally touched his hand. It seemed like such a small and innocent touch, but I felt both of us pause. Lucas looked into my eyes for a moment and smiled slightly. "I always like helping you," he said. Those words sent a wave of warmth through me, but also made me uneasy. I quickly pulled my hand away and said with a nervous smile, "Thank you, Lucas. Your helpfulness always makes me happy," I said. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the way Lucas looked at me, weighing over and over again in my head what he said and what I felt. It's just an illusion, I tried to convince myself, but I couldn't help comparing the warmth I felt in those moments to something I hadn't felt with David in years. In the following days, the time Lucas and I spent together became more meaningful. We went for long walks after breakfast. We sat on the porch in the evenings and talked for hours. Every sentence, every look he gave me made me feel less alone, but at the same time, it caused a confusion inside me that I couldn't control. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch, Lucas turned to me and asked, "Mum, are you happy?" This question broke something inside me. I looked away and said, "Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask me that?" But I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. "I don't know. Sometimes I think you seem lonely. You act like everything is fine, but you're not really happy," Lucas said, pulling his chair a little closer. Those words shattered me, because Lucas had seen something that even David hadn't seen in all this time. My eyes welled up and I said quietly, "Life doesn't always turn out the way we want it to, Lucas." But he cut me off and said, "I just want you to know that I'm always here for you." At that moment, I found Lucas's hand in mine, and it seemed to be just a touch of support and comfort. But we kept our hands together, and that small contact sent a wave of warmth through me. The way Lucas looked at me, every word he spoke, reminded me of a sense of worth that I hadn't felt in a long time. As I retired to my room at night, I kept asking myself the same question. Why do I feel so complicated? Was it just a closeness, a connection, or were there other feelings deep inside that I couldn't control? I found myself struggling with these questions. The next few days were a period in which the bond between us became more and more apparent. My time with Lucas was filled with moments when I felt both alive and guilty. Every little contact, every eye contact, every moment created a deeper attraction in me. But knowing that these feelings were wrong, I tried to suppress them. One evening, during a phone call from David, I once again felt the distance in his voice. As usual, he only said a few words to me about work, then hung up in a hurry. When I hung up the phone, the loneliness inside me grew. This space between my husband and me was consuming me. "I won't be able to come this weekend," he said on the phone that morning after David's cold call in the evening. And that morning, a deeper emptiness and anger welled up inside me. This news, a consequence of our years of distant marriage, left me feeling completely emotionally alone. When I hung up the phone, I was sitting on the porch with tears in my eyes when Lucas came out of his room and came over to me. Without trying to hide the worry on his face, he asked, "Is everything okay, Freya?" The first time Lucas called me by my name instead of Mom left a strange echo inside me. It seemed like an innocent mistake, but I felt as if a layer of our relationship had been peeled away over the years. "Yes, Lucas, I'm just a little tired," I said, trying to give him a smile back. "Let's go to the beach today," he said. "You'll feel better if we get some fresh air." His suggestion was more like a consolation than a mere suggestion. I nodded and said, "You're right, let's go out," I said. When we reached the beach, the warm breeze in the sun gave me some relief. Lucas set up the umbrella and laid out the towels. As my gaze shifted to his young and strong build, a restlessness I couldn't make sense of appeared inside me. The fact that he had grown so much made it hard for me to understand how the years had passed, and strangely, I felt as energetic and alive around him as I had in my 20s. I lay on the towel, feeling the heat of the sun on my shoulders. Lucas was sitting on the sand, watching the sea. Breaking the silence, I said, "Lucas, can you put sunscreen on my back? My shoulders are starting to burn," I said. He turned his head and looked at me. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "Sure, Freya, of course," he said. She took some cream from the bottle and spread it on her hand. "Your back?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Smiling, I nodded and laid down on my stomach. His first touch was light, even tentative. As his fingers roamed over my shoulders, I felt a strange warmth inside me. "You can rub it all over my back, Lucas," I said, giving him a sign to relax. The pressure in his hands increased. His movements became more fluid, almost like he was massaging my back. I could feel his fingers sliding slowly down my shoulders, each touch sending a wave of warmth through my body that I hadn't felt in a long time. "Freya, your skin is so soft. I have to be careful not to damage your perfect body," he said, his voice low and soft. A shiver ran through me when I heard those words, but at the same time he was too gentle to make me uncomfortable. I gasped as I felt his hands move down my lower body. "Lucas, it's just," I started, but I couldn't finish the sentence because his fingers started to move more boldly. The rhythm of his hands slowed down. His touch became more of an exploration. At that moment, Lucas's hands were just below my waist. I took a deep breath and tried to stop myself. I parted my lips to say, "Okay, that's enough," but no sound came out. Something inside me told me not to ruin the magic of this moment. His hands were slowly touching my bikini bottoms. Suddenly, Lucas's hand stopped just above my bikini bottoms. We both held our breath. The movement of his hand paused for a moment. Then, with an almost imperceptibly light touch, his fingers slipped through the fabric of the bikini, and all my muscles went rigid, and I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. I looked up at him for a moment, and when his eyes met mine directly, I felt the boundary between us completely erased. There was both attraction and hesitation in Lucas's gaze. "I'm sorry. I went too far," Lucas said, pulling his hand away quickly, but his expression reflected more the confusion of someone who had lost control than remorse. "Yes, it's wrong," I said, but the uncertainty in my voice belied my words. "Let's go back," Lucas said, looking away from me. There was a deep silence in the car the whole ride back from the beach. Lucas kept his eyes on the road and his lips tightly closed. I sat in the seat next to him, my hands clasped tightly, questioning the events in my mind over and over again. I couldn't deny the feeling of his touch, the turmoil rising inside me. When we got home, Lucas quickly got out of the car and packed the trunk. "I'm going into the bathroom," he said, and without waiting, he headed for his room. The tension in his behavior made the atmosphere even heavier. I went into the kitchen and started preparing for dinner. My hands were still shaking as I took the ingredients out of the cupboard. I whispered to myself, "This was a mistake. It has to end here." But the thoughts in my mind would not accept that. When Lucas came out of the bathroom and came into the kitchen, he looked younger and calmer than he was in his clean t-shirt and messy hair. After looking at me in silence for a while, he asked, "Can I help you?" His voice was calm and gentle, but it did little to mask the tension between us. "Sure," I said, handing him the cutting board and the vegetables. "Can you chop these?" Lucas moved to my side and set to work. As I watched his fingers dance over the knife, the sensation of his touch on my body came back to me. We worked in silence for a few minutes, but then, as I reached out to pick up a pot, I touched his hand. The touch seemed brief and innocent, but our eyes met immediately, and Lucas's face showed a moment of surprise, followed by a deep look. My heart sped up. "Sorry," I said, but he smiled quietly and said, "It's okay." In that moment, in that narrow space of the kitchen, it was as if the whole world stopped around us. To break the intense attraction between us, I said, "Let's make dinner and eat on the porch, okay?" Lucas nodded in agreement. We ate on the porch under the stars. Lucas's silence in front of me made me uncomfortable, but also attracted, too. After I poured the last glass of the bottle, I took a deep breath and decided to speak. I was completely stoned, but I mustered up the courage. "Lucas, we need to talk about what happened today," I said, my voice hesitant and shaky. Lucas placed his glass on the table and looked directly at me. The intensity in his eyes made it even harder for me to form my words. "We did something wrong. We have to end this here." Lucas cut me off and pulled his chair closer to me. "No, Freya, I can't do this." he said. His voice was both determined and emotional. "I grew up with you. You've been everything to me my whole life, not just a mother figure. You were my world, and now I realize that my feelings for you are much deeper than that. I feel for you like I've never felt for anyone else, and I can't stop feeling for you." Lucas's words created a storm of emotions inside me. The sincerity and intensity in his eyes broke all my resistance. "Lucas, that's not true," I said, but the weakness in my voice said the opposite. "Right or wrong, I can't stop feeling you," Lucas said, and slowly leaned into my face. There were only a few inches between our lips. All the logic in me screamed that I should stop him, but in that moment, my heart and body were not making the same cry. Lucas slowly brushed his lips against mine. The first contact was both gentle and full of passion. My heart began to race as Lucas's hands slid to my waist, his touch completely capturing me. All thoughts in my mind were silenced as his strong arms enveloped me. I was drifting deeper into forbidden passion. As Lucas slid his lips to my neck, I felt my body ready to merge with his with each touch. This time he had touched me in all the wrong places, and I was in no position to stop him. Under the stars on the porch, everything happened that night. All our boundaries, all our barriers disappeared. Lucas was touching me in a way that he was listening to me, seeing me, feeling me. In that moment, I felt the whole world stop. In the morning, I woke up to the cold stone floor of the porch, and when I opened my eyes, Lucas was sleeping next to me. His calm expression conveyed a peacefulness that contrasted with the intensity of the night, and I felt both a great happiness and a storm raging inside me. I stared at him for a while, not knowing what to do. The impact of the night's events was still with me, echoing in my body and in my mind. But these feelings were not enough to suppress the guilt inside me. Pulling myself together, I quietly got up from the porch and entered the house. Throughout the day, only one question echoed in my mind. How did we get to this point? David's face haunted me. I may have been a woman he'd neglected for years, but that didn't justify my actions. I had a thing for Lucas. Lucas tried to act normal throughout the day. At the breakfast table, we avoided making eye contact, but every little movement, every glance, increased the tension between us. That evening, a text message from David landed on my phone. "I might be able to extend for a few more days next week. Busy at work. I hope you understand." When I read this message, a mixture of anger and despair rose up inside me. As always, I had been left alone, but now this loneliness was giving way to a different feeling. I was watering the flowers in the garden. Lucas came up to me and said with a slight smile, "They look beautiful." I tried to avert my eyes from him, but it was impossible not to feel his gaze on me. "Freya, you don't need to be so nervous," he said, his voice calm but determined at the same time. "It doesn't feel wrong." Those words resonated with me. I turned to him and said, "Lucas, what we did, it's unforgivable." But he took a few steps closer and said, "But no one made you feel this way, right? Was there another time when you felt so lost? When David ignored you?" In that moment, every word Lucas said to me broke down my defenses. "Lucas, please, this can't go on any longer," I whispered, but his voice stopped me. "Freya, I love you. I haven't stopped thinking about you for a couple of years. I can't stop feeling like we're something more. I can't stop thinking about last night." Those words suddenly removed all distance between us. Lucas gently put his hand on my face, his fingers gently caressing my cheek. "I don't want to hurt you, but I don't want to lose you," he said. With those words, our lips met again. The kiss was more passionate, more determined. That night, that moment in the garden, was the moment when everything changed completely. Lucas took me gently in his arms and pulled me into a passion we could no longer resist. Everything felt like a dream, forbidden, but at the same time undeniable attraction. In the morning, everything that had happened in the garden swirled in my mind. I sat on my bed and thought about David's face. I tried to remember the happy days of our past. But Lucas's gaze, his touch, and the intensity I felt in those moments overshadowed everything else. I asked myself, how did we get here? But I knew the answer: loneliness. The way David had ignored me for years. The worthlessness I felt as a woman. All these things had brought me to this point, but my feelings for Lucas were so much more than loneliness. There is a reason why I am telling my story here, to know that I am not alone, and at the same time, maybe it can be a lesson for someone else. When you feel so alone, you can never imagine what you are capable of, but the price can be heavy. What would you do? Would you let your heart lead you down such a wrong path, or would you stop yourself? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If this story connected with you, be sure to like and share it, because sometimes just knowing that we are not alone makes a difference.